Hi everyone, it's Becky here. So today's sketching tutorial will be about sketching this famous St. Paul street in Old Montreal. So for this streetscape, I'm dealing with one-point perspective. Most of these horizontal lines, they're going down into a vanishing point somewhere in the middle of this page spread. And the bottom lines of these buildings are going upwards into that vanishing point. I'm using these vertical lines to divide the buildings into individual ones, and they are very foreshortened, from this perspective. And these buildings here on the right hand side, they're being less foreshortened because they're not bending that much compared to the buildings on the left. Now, I'm ready to fine line based on my very quick blunt pencil draft. I'm starting to trace out the big shapes of these buildings from the left to the middle. This one is facing me straight. Yeah, so the horizontal lines are pretty straight, not tilting. Adding a window for that. And then I want to focus more on getting these big shapes in before the medium and small shapes. These horizontal lines of the roofs are above my eye level, so they're going down. And the bottom lines of buildings are always below our eye level. Yeah, so they're going upwards into the vanishing point. Now I want to add on a jogger. She's running by in front of me and disappearing down the street. So it's very early in the morning now, like around 7:30, and this St. Paul street is very, very quiet with just a few people passing by and just drawing and shading those little windows on this pub building. And the flakes are really fun to add on. Now I'm using a super loose and doodly approach to get these windows in, dividing them into vertical columns, and then fill in these super foreshortened columns with these skinny windows. And now I want to sketch a man, yeah, a little bit closer to me compared to the jogger lady. And then adding on these display windows and a lamp. So these buildings in Old Montreal, they used to be trading companies. So back in the 19th century, there used to be lots of merchants walking around here. So as I'm sketching this streetscape, I'm kind of using my imagination to visualize the lifestyle from over a century ago. And now I'm adding the slanting lines for the triangular roofs of these shops. And adding these little cubicles of like maybe attic windows. And yeah, so these are kind of like little birdhouse structures, like little attic rooms behind these windows. Adding more horizontal lines dividing the floors. And adding some shop signs. And a lamp attached to the exterior of the building. So as you can see, the widths of these buildings on the right are wider and wider visually. They're closer to me on the far right. And there's a pretty big area of climbing ivies on the side wall of this building, adding a sense of nature. And drawing these foreshortened windows and these flags from several countries in the world. They are very nice highlights in Old Montreal. Yeah, so these windows, they're short horizontal lines on the top and bottom. they're going downwards into the vanishing point on the middle of that little building in the far distance. So at 7 a.m. right now, most of these shops are not open until maybe 9 or 10 in the morning. And drawing the windows behind these flakes. More horizontal lines going down into that vanishing point. And shading these windows a little bit to push the flakes forward better. And drawing the steps in front of the entrance. And the vertical bars of the display windows. The iron gate is still locked. And shading this front door area to suggest, yeah, there's really like a large room behind that. Adding more horizontal lines and little cubicles of attic windows. A gutter. And these windows closer to me now, as you can see, they are way bigger visually compared to the ones a bit far away. And then drawing the door and the window just a few steps away from me, nice and big. And this street is going to get really busy in just a couple of hours. Now I'm using very gentle hand pressure and these loose shapes of squares and rectangles to suggest the rocky exterior of this building. And then these floating shapes are the eave area. Now I'm drawing the winding sidewalk going into the vanishing point, and same for the right hand side. And I'm still using very gentle hand pressure to doodle the cobblestones, and I'm not going to draw all of the cobblestones. I want sharp focus on the foreground area, and that's it. Now I'm ready to start painting. So the painting part of this video is mostly not edited, just to save time. At the same time, you can have a better view of my painting process. So I just wetted the sky area with clear water. And I'm mixing spring green with manganese blue. The very bottom of the sky is looking a little greenish early in the morning. And towards the middle is like turquoise blue. And I'm going to continue to drag the color upwards. So when I'm painting sky, I like to keep my blues and turquoise very transparent by mixing quite a bit of water. So the middle and the higher part of the sky is pretty much pure manganese blue, which is very similar to cerulean blue. So I'm using Daniel Smith's watercolors here. And the direction of my brush marks are a little diagonal, suggesting the sky is a dome shape. Yeah, so when you're painting your sky, try to dilute your blues and turquoise colors a bit more with water to achieve this very translucent look. And the next step is to underpaint everything under the sky with this warm glowing yellow, which is the blend of Indian yellow and yellow ochre. Yeah, so the morning sunshine can be like very golden yellowish. And after doing the underpainting, I'm ready to paint the warm colors on these buildings, starting with orange brown, as I observe. So I'm playing with permanent orange and burnt sienna, and also more concentrated yellow ochre, blending these 2 or 3 colors together because on a brown or terracotta building, it's never just a flat singular color. There is always a sense of value and color transition because the sun is always shining unevenly on the surface of all buildings. And I'm going to continue to play with the mix of burnt sienna with orange and maybe a bit of yellow ochre. So here I just added on a heavier tone of burnt sienna with less water mixed into it. And now I'm mixing permanent red with orange and also a little bit of burnt sienna to paint this building closer up, looking warmer. And cleaned my brush on the towel and start to add some early grays to shade very gently, pausing a little bit to think about the next area to paint. So I'm grabbing some stronger yellow ochre to illuminate the higher part of those buildings even brighter. I think the sun was shining directly onto the higher areas of those buildings. Now I'm using burnt umber to shade the bottom half of these buildings to make it really convincing that the sun is shining or illuminating the top half of these buildings. I'm also blending in a bit of cobalt blue to intensify the shade. And yet a little stronger cobalt blue because the right side of these rectangular prisms may be shaded. The left half of these buildings are exposed to the sunlight. Yeah, so it's nature that the sun cannot illuminate both sides of a building, just one side. Okay, so now I'm grabbing some pure permanent red to paint the red areas on these flakes and the little red awning for the entrance of that pub. Spotting other red areas, yeah, like these flakes in the foreground. I think that one is the Canadian flag. Yeah, so it's very nice to have like these saturated, reds in any urban sketch. So in another situation, there could be a little red shirt on someone's body, or the red rear lights on cars. And now I just adding on some green and also blue on these flakes. And just taking my time to add these saturated warm and cold colors on the flakes. Because most of these buildings have like very muted colors, it's very nice to have these vibrant colors pop. Now I'm ready to add some drama to the middle of this sketch. Now I'm mixing cobalt blue with imperial purple to add on a shadow onto this building. So you have to be really brave to do shading work. But I'm keeping the blue violet pretty diluted. So the yellow underpainting is still pretty bright, pushing through. It's not absolutely all shaded. And yeah, just pausing for a few seconds to think, grabbing some leftover blue violet to add on the shadow under the roof, the eave area. And punching on a bit of stronger yellow ochre. So the sun is rising higher and higher as we move from 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. Now I'm using burnt sienna to paint the roof of that little pub building. And cleaning my brush a little bit. Now grabbing some pure yellow ochre to paint the brick areas in between the climbing ivies. So there are little pockets of the exterior wall showing in between the leafy greens of climbing ivies. Now I'm using pure spring green with a little bit of yellow ochre mixed in, and use these dotting brush marks to paint the clusters of leaves. And I think this area of the wall is going to look really beautiful in autumn when these greens turn into red, likely. Continue to play with spring green and yellow ochre. Every brush mark is kind of like a different color definition because I'm going back to the palette to grab more or less yellow ochre. And yeah, I love this bits of foliage here on the side wall of this building, adding a bit more fresh air. So since I just painted the green area, I'm continuing to use spring green and hooker's green to paint other green parts like the signs, the window frames. And the next step is to paint the surface colors of these buildings on the right. And for this one, I mixed yellow ochre with burnt umber. And for this lower area, a higher ratio of burnt umber to suggest a bit of shade. And the next one is the mix of cobalt blue and imperial purple. Very thin glades because I think this building is white gray. Again, the bottom is more shaded compared to the higher part. Okay, so I just painted some cold blue violets. Now I need to find a good color balance for this sketch by adding more warm colors. For the chimney, yeah, I just simply punch on a bit of burnt sienna. And yeah, some more shading for the upper level of this building using cobalt blue and imperial purple, keeping the wash very diluted so it's transparent over the yellow underpainting. Yeah, so I'm just adding these washes very slowly and gently without overpainting the areas. So I would like you to see my real-time painting process this time so you have a more realistic view of my process. So I'm using the mix of burnt sienna and a little bit of burnt umber to paint these more shaded rocks on the exterior of this building. And I'm still using my large tip Holbein Water Brush, so each wash is very fluid without dry brushing marks. So these days I'm using less and less of my medium tip water brush because the tip is a little dry and sometimes creating like dry brushing marks. So I love loose, free-flowing washes better now compared to my earlier years painting. And I think the spirit of watercolor painting is all about the sense of free flow, the magical blend of two or more colors together freely without putting too much control on blending them manually. Now I'm using cobalt blue and imperial purple to shade these glassy windows. And same for this iron gate area and under the window door frames. Little bit of shadow landing on the sidewalk. Now I'm using burnt sienna with a tiny bit of imperial purple to paint the sidewalk on the left. Higher ratio of imperial purple on the edge of the building to suggest shadow. Same for the other side. And then painting this building on the end of the street using yellow ochre and a bit of burnt umber for the roof. And just gradually punching on some bits of colors, mostly yellow ochre. If you look very intently at the real world in front of you, section by section, every little bit has like an interesting sense of color. Now I'm using cobalt blue to intensify the shadow on the bottom of these buildings, on the sidewalk. Okay, and then grabbing some pure cobalt blue to paint that part of the French flag. And now I'm gonna get really expressive painting the cobblestone street, starting with burnt sienna, quite diluted. Mixing a little bit of imperial purple into it, wet into wet. And a higher ratio of imperial purple. And don't be afraid of these uneven colors, because all surfaces in the world, they're always uneven. Including flat surfaces, they could have a sense of value and color transition. Bravely blending on some cobalt blue. And slowing down a little bit to think instead of keep punching on more colors. Now, I just grabbed a stronger tone of burnt sienna containing less water, a bit of orange. Yeah, the foreground is a little bit brighter and the color tone a bit more intense. And grabbing a teeny tiny bit of burnt sienna to add another layer of color definition for that distant building. Same for here. Yeah, very subtly. And more burnt sienna, yeah, for that part of the building that I forgot to paint. And imperial purple, too shaded. Yeah, as you can see, I'm not using that many colors to do this urban sketch. I think I've got just 12 colors in this mini palette, and I don't need more than that to paint anything. Some more cobalt blue here and there. And the world of watercolors is kind of different compared to other mediums, where water plays a great role in producing very powerful paintings, more than just randomly mix any amount of water into the pigment. So yeah, you really have to be aware of how much water you need to mix into the paint. And for glazing on shaded surface, you need to mix a lot of water into the gray. So in this case, I like to use blue violet. So early in the morning is actually a very ideal time to paint, where you get a pretty good balance of light and shade and strong contrast to give more drama to your painting. And I'm going to continue to add these subtle bits of grays in slow and careful brush marks. Still the mix of cobalt blue and imperial purple. Now I'm using my medium tip water brush for smaller marks. And this little bit of blue violet on the chimney is careful. I'm leaving the left side unshaded because it's receiving more sunlight. Same for here. Left side facing the sun. And yeah, some more blue violet to give this part of the roof a heavier tone. So as you're watching my painting process, you're going to generate your own knowledge that may not always be spoken by me. And I think everybody from the audience watching this video is going to generate their own understandings of this tutorial. Now, I'm shading these climbing ivies using heavier tones of green. So yeah, hooker's green with a little bit of burnt sienna. So I'm using the mix of hooker's green with burnt sienna to suggest the volume of the climbing ivy. So a lot of times if you're not happy with your painting, that probably means you need to paint one more layer of shading tones. And for the color scheme green, you can mix more and more burnt sienna into hooker's green or viridian green to make the green shade even darker. And this scenery now I think is looking perfect with this hanging carpet of climbing ivies. Love the refreshing greens. Now I'm going back to the muted grays and adding some retouches of yellow. And there are some areas that still need to be shaded using blue violet, knowing that the light source, the sun, is on the left. So the right side of these small sections are shaded. And I can feel that some of the gray areas could be even heavier, like this window here. So another layer of blue violet containing less water. So yeah, water control technique here. So when I'm painting these gray areas, I'm playing with the balance of imperial purple and cobalt blue. As you can see, some areas has like very high ratio of cobalt blue. Other areas are blooming with brighter purple. Yeah, and of course, those white areas on the flakes needs to be shaded, at least with light gray, not glaring white. And now it's time to paint these two people. So skin color is simply orange mixed with permanent red, diluted with a lot of water to get a skin tone. And I think I want to paint the guy's t-shirt using mostly cobalt blue. And the lady's shirt green, because I think I need a bit more colder tones in this sketch. Black pants. So I'm mixing burnt sienna into leftover blue violet to get a color close to black. And yeah, so it's very enjoyable to see myself sketching as an outsider when I'm editing these videos. So right now is the final polishing stage. So adding last bit of grays and browns. So in this stage, if you're seeing some colors are looking a little fade out, you can always punch it stronger again by mixing less water. Yeah, so grays in between the railings. And my very last move is to intensify the shade on these buildings on the left. Since the sun is on the left, these sides of the buildings are experiencing the backlighting condition, so they're mostly very shaded. And the imperial purple and the cobalt blue from Daniel Smith is pretty high quality, making the gray areas very vibrant. And here's the look of my finished sketch. So in total, it took me 1 hour and 10 minutes to draw and paint on location. So thank you so much for watching this video, everyone. If you like it, please click like and leave me a comment below. Subscribe to my channel for more tutorial videos coming up, and I'll see you around in the next video very soon. Take care, everyone. Bye.